Hey guys, welcome back to the RCA RR-359 Restoration Project Christmas Edition. We have some random things to discuss, and I want to show you some, well, gifts to myself, I guess you could say, that have shown up. Let's start out with the tuner. I know more than I did when I ended the last video about the tuner local oscillator. So one, as a number of you pointed out, yeah, it sure looks like it is a Hartley oscillator. Also, thanks to a tip, I found a schematic from Meisner. Meisner sold kits, TV kits, I think pre-war and post-war, just very briefly post-war. And they seem to have based their design to some extent on RCA. And their tuner, it's a 5-position rotary switch tuner. It looks very much like the later tuner that would come with this set. So I've been talking a lot about this continuously variable tuner that's missing from mine that I want to replicate. There was a later tuner they put on some. It was a another factory modification that had, I think it was a 12-position rotary switch. Maybe it was 13 because I did have channel 1 back then. And it used, instead of a 76 and an experimental A305A tube, it used a 6J5 for the local oscillator, which is basically a 76 inside of a metal shielded shell. And I think it was an 1852 tube. So these experimental A305s and A306s, I think, led to the 1851 and 1852, which I believe is the same as a 6AC7. Which you see loads of in the later pre-war sets and the early post-war sets. Like I have a GE, I think it's an 802 that has a bunch of 6AC7s in it. My point with all that is we have other options for the tuner besides this. I could try to replicate the 12 or 13 position RCA tuner, which I've heard doesn't look that well. I have a photo of one that looks a little crude. Or I could do a 5-position tuner, like is in the Meisner schematic, which I believe is the same as the early TRK series, TRK 5912. But I think I want to stick with the continuous tuner. One, I think it'd be the easiest, and I think it's the more interesting design, flawed though it may be. So I was reading from a book called Television in the last installment, and they showed this tuner, and they talked a little bit about the design, and they mentioned about the coupling between, because I was wondering how does it couple the local oscillator, the mixer, and the antenna, and they said it was through the capacitor shaft. Well, no, it's not. I have a photo of what the original tuner looked like, and a colleague pointed out what some of the components are matching with the schematic. The coils are wound on a common form. The antenna coil, the mixer coil, the LO coil are on a common phenolic form. That's where the coupling takes place, between the coils, not along the capacitor shaft. So I have a much better idea of how it's constructed. Physically, I tried installing this. They're placing it on the chassis. It's slightly too big or a little awkward. So this has some threaded shafts coming out the bottom. And if those were to go into holes in the top of the chassis, it would mount like this. If I do that, these trimmers are getting awfully close to the focus rheostat, which is right above it. The original is more like in this configuration, which I could possibly do. These holes don't appear to be threaded, but perhaps they could be used as a mounting point. I can mount it more like this. But even so, I think it's a little bit wider than the original. Anyways, we're still going to experiment with this. Somebody pointed out, hey, what's the capacitance range on this? That's right, I didn't show it. But I do have this LCR meter from FNI RSI. It's an LC1020E that we can use to check that out. Now, when I ordered this, I was mistaken in what I actually ordered. Yes, it's from Hallicrafters. I think it's an SS64 or something like that. I thought it was the tuning cap. It's not. It's the band spread cap. So I actually bought this without knowing what the specs on these are. I thought these were 3 ganged capacitors with a similar range to what was in this set originally, but no. This is actually 6 capacitors. We have 2, 2, and 2. These are independent. However, I can parallel them up very easily. The fixed plates on these are all, at least I think it's well, maybe it's the rotary, the movable, sorry. The movable plates are all connected together, and through some brushes on there, they go to ground. So these are all grounded. The fixed ones, these are 6 independent variable caps. So let's check one of them out. Clip this on here and clip one onto the frame. We can get a reading off of this. So let's go fully open, which should be the least capacitance. We're getting around 15 picofarad. Now, notice there are 3 trimmers, not 6. Only 3 out of these 6 have trimmers, the other 3 don't. The ones with trimmers have a higher capacitance because there's another fixed capacitor or variable cap in parallel with this guy. We'll see that in a moment. So our minimum capacitance is about 15. If I rotate this, it goes to about 42. Now the originals were more like 8 to 100, 110, something like that. So we're not there. One, we're a little bit higher on the low end and we're a bit low on the high end, but I could parallel these up, and if they were equal, well then we would have 84, 85, right? Yeah, for this. But that's, again, this is with the trimmer. Let's check the section that doesn't have the trimmer. Because I can take that trimmer out if I really wanted to. Get that ground on there, clip this to the other guy. This cable is a little stiff, so it's a little hard to hook up there. But let's go back to minimum. So without the trimmer, we can get down to 9.7. What was it on the other guy? About 14. So if I took that trimmer off and I paralleled these up, at our low end we'd be at about 20 picofarad. And if I go the other way, it's actually 73. It's interesting that this is higher than the one with the trimmer when they're closed. Yeah, because they look identical visually. They have the same number of plates and they're the same surface area. That's odd. Let's check out the one next to it. 38, 53, 42, 59. So if I parallel these up, the upper range will be very close to what the original was, but the lower range will not. What does that mean? It means I wouldn't be able to tune in the higher frequencies. The original one for something like 40 to 90 megahertz. Maybe this would go from around 40 to 70 megahertz, something like that, which is perfectly fine, especially for experimenting. So absolutely we can use this cap. Even with the info I have, without seeing the one physically in front of me, I think I know enough now. I could start cobbling something together and I could guesstimate the number of turns. Again, if we know the frequency range, we know about what the capacitance is, we can calculate what the inductor should be. So I think we can proceed on that front. All right, enough tuner talk. All right, next up, this is something that I got along with the TV that I haven't talked about yet. I showed some photos of using ads in this on the community tab of my YouTube channel, but I haven't talked about this publication. So this is a copy of Delineator magazine from February 1937. This was a women's sort of high society fashion trend setting type publication. There are some amusing ads. Remember, this is geared towards women, so you're going to see stuff about dresses and diapers and beauty products, stuff like that. But I thought this was funny that people talk about tiny houses now or small houses. Hey, back in '36, during the Depression, they were also pushing Small houses. So why would I have this? Why did it come with the TV? Because there's actually an article in here about somebody's first impressions seeing working television for the first time. Which should come first, wife or business? Yes, some sage advice there. And about music, tips on making better breakfasts, tips for how to keep your home neat, and how to dress and keep yourself beautiful, how to make yourself looking young and pretty so your husband will still respect you, or something to that effect. All right. Wow, look like these are some hard-boiled women criminals here. Oh, we gotta have an article about hats, of course. And blonde furniture. So we think of blonde furniture as being a 50s thing. They were talking about it in the 30s. All right, somewhere in here there's an article about television, I swear. It's been a while since I flipped through this. A lot of ads for laxatives too. I guess that was a big thing back then. Say, hey, you got a cold, take a laxative. If you're not feeling well, take a laxative. Alka-Seltzer, Heinz. Ah, here we go. Finally, we'll zoom in on this a bit. It's titled, I'm in New York. Now, what's annoying is I don't think there don't appear to be any actual photos of a television in the article about seeing television for the first time. But they do show a little bit of some TV cameras. Boy, I really got to zoom in there on that. Whoa. So a little bit of a studio. And I'm not sure what they mean by a plea for Broadway. Maybe they want to start televising some Broadway plays. All right. Recently, the Radio Corporation of America gave a party. It began in the Rainbow and Grill on the 65th floor with the buffet luncheon, on and on. So, picture a room, 20 by 100 feet, where 15 mysterious new machines stood in a row. At first glance, they reminded me of an old type Victrola with lifted lids. But these lids are mirror-lined. They're talking about the set that I have. Some 200 magazine and newspaper writers entered the room and took chairs before the machines. In the semi-darkness, we sat in tense silence waiting to see the premiere demonstration of television. Television, exclamation point. What would it be like? Yeah, I mean, it's hard for us to imagine that these people had never seen a TV before. Maybe they'd heard of them. The mechanical TVs, it's not like they didn't exist, but not what we would think of as a TV. But this is the first time they're seeing something that would be like a modern TV where you could change channels and watch a decent-sized image with fairly decent resolution. Suddenly, as we sat in the dark, there in the lid of the Wonder Machine appeared the small but clear image of Betty Goodwin, television announcer, set out on the air from the Empire State Building dome. To be truthful, I can scarcely believe what I'm writing. She then introduced David Sarnoff on the 7.5 by 10 inch screen. He bowed, smiled, and started speaking. To save my life, I couldn't keep my mind on what he was saying, for I kept thinking, now there's nobody running a movie projector in this room. The thought stayed with me for the entire 40-minute program. I couldn't realize that I was seeing dancers at the instant they were performing on a stage, not in this room. And so on. And that's really about it. it's cool to hear somebody's initial reaction when they can't believe what they're seeing, but there's nothing about any details about the technology or what it took to make this happen or what was coming next, really. It wraps up with, when the lights went on, I glanced down at my notebook. Only 4 words were written there. What next? What next? And they couldn't even remember writing those words down. That's how excited they were. That question is still with me. Will some of us by 1937 get television sets in our Christmas stockings? Radio engineers say it's possible. That is such of us who have a Santa not adverse to spending around $300. Well, they would have to wait a couple more years, I do believe. And I don't know if $300, I think that is about the ballpark what something like a TRK5 or TRK9 eventually sold for. But no, it wasn't until '39 that you could really actually buy one of these TVs. And not, when I say one, I mean, I don't mean like the one I have, I mean the ones that were designed based on the results of this set that I'm working on. They never actually sold a 359 to the public. Let's wrap up with a look at some more of the ads in here. I think you can get scanned copies of just about every issue of this that came out in various online archives. Stuff about gaining weight because no skinny woman has an ounce of sex appeal. Funny to think about in this day and age. People were trying to gain weight back then, not lose weight. How to wake up your liver bile. How to get rid of gray hair. How to look like a young girl. Stuff for cleaning your teeth. Diaper ads. All sorts of fashion tips. But this is the best thing in this publication, I think. Raise giant frogs. Yes, you too could become a multimillionaire in your backyard by raising giant frogs. And I'm not joking. There's a fascinating read, research, a bit of American history. Google American Frog Canning Company, New Orleans, Louisiana. It's quite an amusing read. So back then, frog legs were all the rage. And yeah, if you had the right environment, frogs do lay an awful lot of eggs and lead to a lot of tadpoles. And yes, you could raise giant frogs and sell them and make a small fortune. But the realities of raising giant frogs is not so simple. I'll leave you that to find out the trials and tribulations of giant frogs on your own. What publication would be complete without an ad for Lucky Strike cigarettes? All right, now, it is Christmas Eve, and I did get myself a little present. Well, of course, the TV was the big present to myself, but while I've been doing research for this and looking up stuff online, I've been also looking on eBay, hoping by some miracle maybe to find some parts for it, or at least track down some of the missing tubes or tube sockets and what have you. Well, I came across this. So while RCA was doing these field trials and experimenting, they also published some of their findings into several volumes in the continued post-war. Well, this is volume 2. This is the one most pertinent to the set that I'm working on. I posted links to these on my Patreon page. These publications have been scanned and are freely available. But when I saw there was an actual hard copy, original copy of it, I had to go for it. Man, I think, of course there's going to be another layer. Wow. This didn't cost all that much, but boy, they sure went to town on wrapping it. Now, I thought this was going to be bigger. I thought it was going to be at least 8.5 by 11, but it's kind of tiny. Anyways, here we finally go. Television, the future of the new art and its recent technological developments, rolls right off the tongue. This is volume 2. Volume 1 covers the first field trials, which were done around 31, 32. The second trials that my set was part of were in 36 and 37. I saw this in the original ad. I don't know why. Somebody stuck a little bit of Sylvania news in there, but we can take a look at it. It's from March 1949, which is much later than this publication. This came out in 1937. So, I think I initially called this a 1937 set, but really it's a 36. I think the B modifications were done in 37. They certainly started talking about and planning the field trials in 36. So like that article I just read was from February of 37, and they were already demonstrating it to the public. So they cover a lot of things in this. They first start out with a little bit of background. What of television? And they talk about some developments. They talk about the iconoscope tube. It'd be awesome to get one of these. The one I got's the later actual production model, but this is an early prototype. You only can find those in museums, really, these days. And yes, the images are much better in this than the scanned copy. So there's an early camera. The iconoscope tube mounted inside of it. And to give you some idea of what images look like, the 31 trials, I think, or 32 trials, I think we're done with 129. The one I've got was originally, I think, 343 and later 441 lines. Eventually 525 post-war, so there's 441. So 441 was state-of-the-art in 37. That's just basically, if my set was running on 441, that's the kind of image you could expect to get out of it. There's a TV studio and a control room, and they made telecine things so they could broadcast film. A whole rack of equipment for the film studio control room. So at the same time they're doing these field trials of the TVs, they're working on all this stuff too. So I mentioned about the timing generators. 4 racks of equipment here, synchronizing generator and video line amplifier panels. They were working on shortwave relays so they could broadcast signals, like say from a remote location back to the studio or between studio locations. Like how complicated this stuff is, that's crazy. That's some of the transmitter, video and audio transmitters. Control panel with some monitors on there. And there's the transmitting antenna on top of the Empire State Building. And there is my set. You may have noticed in some of the photos I've shown or images that some have white knobs, some have brown knobs. It's not entirely clear what's up with that. Some thought that they used white for the photos so they have better contrast. I don't know. Again, weird with the variations too. So that has the same escutcheon as mine, but this is the earlier type with the fluting on the cabinet, whereas I have the later one that doesn't have that. And also field tests in 1934 with 343 lines. That seems to get a bit murky. There's some of the 31, 32 sets floating around, but from 34 to 36, there were some other experimental TVs. I don't think they're really documented too well, and I don't know if any examples survive of those. On and on with the control room. Duplicating a lot of these photos too. We could just flip back. No, they do. They do have them in here twice. I wonder why they would do that. All right, so I flipped through this. It doesn't have any detailed schematics. Honestly, that television book that came out a bit later by Zworkin and Morton has a bit more detail about the functionings of it. But this has some great photos and some technical info about the other aspects, like I said, about the studio and the transmitters. I don't think. And they get into projection TV in the back too, so they were working on a lot of fronts simultaneously, and how to make projection setups for movie theaters, and trying to work on making improved versions of camera tubes. So you can see there's the sort of early prototype, and then evolved into that, and that's the type I have that I showed a couple months ago. Different type of camera tube they're experimenting with. So the 30s was all about experimentation, if you haven't picked up on that already. There's a prototype projection CRT. There's an early, I believe that's a 9-inch CRT. So that's the type of picture that would have originally been in my set, 9-inch. Somebody saw that really shiny surface and was asking about that online. And I've also been posting about this in the Antique Radio Forum, by the way. So if you jump on there and go to the television area, you can see there's a lively discussion taking place there. And somebody saw that and was wondering if these were aluminized. No, that's so that the knob sticking out the side goes to the high voltage, and that goes right through to this surface. That whole thing is at the high voltage potential. It's all encoded around the inside of the cone to attract, accelerate, focus the electron beam towards the front. But it does not, that metallization does not extend to the back of the phosphor surface. I don't think they perfected making aluminized picture tubes until around 1946, 47. That's the earliest example I have. Later they used a DAG type coating, a graphite coating on the inside, so it's sort of being metallic. It was sort of a grayish, brushed on kind of look. Anyways, it's neat to have an original copy of this. So there are some schematics in here, but they're not what you think. Oh, I'm glad I kept going, because there's something else I really wanted to show you guys. I think they have. I hope there's a picture of it in here. So in addition to the studio equipment, the transmitting equipment, the receivers, they are also made test equipment, including an oscilloscope. Yeah, here it is. I love to find one of these. The specs in it are probably laughable by today's standards. It's probably 5 megahertz bandwidth, if that. But that is a beast of an oscilloscope, or cathode ray oscillograph, as they called it back then. Look at the bottom on that. It's just like this TV. The electrolytics were kind of not really a thing yet. So my God, that lower chassis probably weighs several hundred pounds just from all the iron of all the transformers and filter chokes. It looks like there's more up here. Just a bunch of old-timey tubes. There were some globe tubes in there. It's crazy. I don't even know the model number. I have no idea if any of these exist. But they do have a schematic for it too. They don't have a schematic of the TV, I'm pretty sure, right? The TV components. But they do give you a schematic of the oscilloscope. Used 802 tubes for the input amps. And some 6C6s and type 42 tubes. It's crazy. Anyway, that's a fun read. More about the transmitters. One more thing to show you guys. As we saw from that article, by 37 they were demonstrating these new TVs to a select group. Well, that continued on into 38, 39 at various expositions and World's Fairs. There was one in San Francisco where they had some 359s. There was, of course, the big New York World's Fair in 39. We had TRK set up and possibly some 359s as well. Well, there's souvenirs from some of these events. If you go onto eBay or Etsy and you search for World's Fair or souvenirs, memorabilia, you can find some stuff. And a friend tipped me off that, hey, they had some nifty glassware. So I got myself an RCA branded highball glass with a neat triode symbol on it from the 39 World's Fair. And when I get this set working, I am going to use this to celebrate. Next up, we're going to start working, or at least exploring, the power supply chassis. I bought a Lazy Susan mechanism that can handle up to 1,000 pounds. I'm going to build a platform for my workbench. We're going to get that power supply up on it. We're going to start checking the transformers and the chokes for continuity and start talking about replacing parts. That's it for now. Thanks for watching.